everybody. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This podcast episode will be all about the new Procurement Act. Joined with me today is Josh Armstrong. He is Regional Head of Framework Management over at Wilmot Dixon. So as you can imagine, Josh has a plethora of knowledge all about the public sector market, frameworks, and kind of what the new Procurement Act means for Wilmot Dixon as a principal contractor. So thanks so much for joining us today, Josh. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. So just going to have a little bit of a chat really about the new Procurement Act and kind of how you see it going and any challenges or opportunities you at Wilmot Dixon kind of are having a look at. Obviously, I suppose from what we know about the new Procurement Act that's kind of in the public domain at the moment, it's kind of broken down into different sort of topic areas that are going to be changing. So we'll just have a little discussion around each of those areas, and then obviously just your input would be brilliant. So I suppose that the first point that's been picked up is there's going to be a big change in the visibility of pipeline, meaning that contractors will be able to see what's coming down the track in terms of new project opportunities. So I just wondered, Josh, from a contractor perspective, how do you think the increased visibility of procurement pipeline under the new Act would benefit Wilmot Dixon, particularly pre-construction resource and bid teams?
Yeah, thanks, Faye. So I guess for any business, surety and visibility of pipeline, especially in our industry, supports us in managing our resources effectively. We know it's really difficult and challenging for the public sector to provide certainty at times because it's a moving model and the way that finances are managed, it can be quite a challenge. So more visibility is absolutely better for us. We welcome that, and I think we've had some moves in the sector, particularly in central government, where they're looking to provide greater visibility of planned works to support contractors, our supply chain, to gear up for those procurement exercises. I think we just need to be aware that the guidance and the Act still includes some parameters, and there are some thresholds that apply to it, particularly around how much a public body intends to spend within a financial year, and sometimes or there will be a threshold around values of projects. So I think we would love greater visibility and to be able to see everything that is being planned, but we appreciate that isn't always possible. Whatever we can get visibility of, that allows us to manage that pre-construction resource far more effectively, particularly when most contractors, us included, we start preparing for a bid well in advance of it actually landing. So whether that's understanding more about the project, the customer, their values, the risks of the project, does it align to our business strategy, to our values? So there's some good work that we can do, and if dates do move slightly, we understand that that's normal, but the greater the visibility, the better. And I think it will take a while for that to truly come through and to see tangible differences in what we do see in the public domain. But yeah, we'd love greater visibility, and actually it allows us to provide a better response to the customer. If we've got surety on that, we can ring fence the right people for the projects early, make sure that they've got that time allocated to work on that bid, and if they're the right person for the bid, generally the greater the response is for consideration.
Absolutely. I think pre-construction management for everybody is really, really difficult. You know, everyone's got very limited sort of bid resource, haven't they? I suppose that the sort of thought that we've had at Procure Partnerships Framework is that the accuracy of that pipeline, and not just kind of putting opportunities out there for the sake of it because people feel obliged to do so. It's also sort of getting that right, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. So I think the Act talks about potential pipeline, and I guess some authorities, some public bodies may feel that they should publish anything and everything, whether it's a viable project or not. And I guess as we work through the new visibility of pipeline, that's something we just need to get to grips with. And again, just as important actually is when a pipeline is published and dates potentially move, the earlier that we're informed as contractors, and you as a framework provider, that again helps manage that resource. So we appreciate it'll move, but as soon as you're aware as a client, it's going to move. Publicising that and communicating that out is certainly a help for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, it'll be very interesting to see how sort of pipeline development takes place over the next couple of months, few years. So yeah, let's see how that comes to fruition. Just moving on a step then. So once an opportunity has obviously come out to market, and you've submitted a tender, and then another big area of change, so it seems, is you getting feedback on bid responses in terms of whether you've been successful or not. A big change is obviously moving away from most economically advantageous tender, a MEET, to a most advantageous tender, a MAT.
Yeah.
So I just wondered, in terms of that sort of increased level of feedback that is anticipated, as well as less of a sort of focus on cost and commercials with the change from MEET to MAT, how do you think that will impact you, positively or negatively?
So I'm no expert in the Act, but from the training we've undertaken as a business and from the conversations we've had, if we start with feedback, I think feedback can be quite different in the levels of quality feedback we currently receive as contractors, and that's across consultants as well who bid for work. I guess from our point of view, generic feedback doesn't help us improve as much as detailed feedback. And ultimately, we're a business that's got continuous improvement embedded within it. We look at lessons learned regularly. Before we start a new bid, the team come together and we discuss what we've done previously that's worked well, what we haven't, and what we can improve on. Greater feedback will allow that to be spread across the business and everyone improve the quality of their bid response. Again, giving the client or the customer a better bid response in the future. So we understand now that the emphasis on feedback isn't just to give a narrative on, say, why you scored a 4 out of 5, but it should now cover, well, you scored a 4, but to get a 5, you should have done X, Y, and Z. That's really important for us as a contractor, because again, with some feedback, we interpret it, we end up interpreting it, and sometimes we interpret it that correctly, and other times we interpret that incorrectly. So clearly defined areas for improvement are really useful for our business. That will then fall back into a lessons learned agenda, shared across our bid teams, across our pre-construction teams. Sometimes it's relevant for construction and operational teams as well. So we'd welcome that. We really will welcome that. And then I think the second part about the change from MEET to MAT, well, looking at the guidance, we welcome that. We think that provides more of an open area for customers to look at what value really means for their business, but not just focusing on cost. What do I need as a local authority, or what would look really good for me from a value perspective, whether that's a clearly defined social value strategy that focuses on areas of impact that are important to me, rather than a more generic social value response that you sometimes get, whether it's a sustainability drive, whether it's focusing on higher quality design and construction. I think that's really important for local authorities to get to grips with. I think we as a contractor can help a customer define what value means to them outside of cost alone. And again, hopefully it takes a shift away from the way that tenders are set up, in that we know cost is massively important. The public purse is under severe stress. I think that's in the public domain. Everyone appreciates that. But focusing on tenders that sometimes reward the lowest cost drive different behaviours. And as contractors, we have to respond to that tender, and our behaviour and our responses can reflect that. So that might be a move to score commercials in a way that's more on a median, rather than lowest is higher, or highest scores. So again, we really welcome that change. I think it means that we as contractors aren't focusing on driving our supply chain to provide lowest costs again, which can have serious ramifications and projects and put undue stress on our partners. So whilst we understand we need to be competitive from a cost perspective, which we will be and are, what can we do that's actually going to provide additional value, and the tender guidance should hopefully allow our customer to set up their procurement exercises and competitions, so that we can drive innovation and provide responses that that hit their wider agendas, as well as costs, which we know is important.
Certainly. No, I think here at Procure Partnerships Framework, we certainly do also echo a lot of the points you've just made up there. We certainly never encourage a race to the bottom on price. We know the damage it can do to supply chain. And as you've touched on there, there's a lot of additional value that also needs, really evaluating and taking a look at, like the quality and the social value and health and safety and a myriad of other different things that go above and beyond just the price.
And we can work as an industry collaboratively to support our local authorities, our blue light services, to understand what value means in their community, what value means to that organisation. It's an exercise that won't happen overnight, but certainly something we and you as a framework provider can facilitate amongst your users, and contractors will happily input into that.
Brilliant. Okay, if we just take a slight step back then, so if we just look more at procurement and frameworks more holistically and not necessarily at a call-off method, a call-off stage for a particular project. There's obviously lots of different change there as well, in terms of the concept of open frameworks, slightly different sort of styles of framework and call-off procedures. As Wilmot Dixon, have you got any sort of thoughts and opinions on those slightly different variations of sort of frameworks, procurement styles?
I think from our perspective, we sit on a number of core frameworks, of which PPF is one. And those frameworks will continue to run and operate as they are now, compliantly. And I think that's really important for customers to understand, because come October, we don't want it to be a cliff edge change in procurement regs and how things are undertaken. And I think it will take time for people to understand how to implement those changes in their organisations from a procurement perspective. So we've got a set and a number of frameworks that can deliver. They're tried and tested, oven ready, if we call it that. I think the open frameworks they're really interesting from our perspective. It'd be no different to how we would assess a framework in the current climate we're on. We'd look at what the goals of that framework are. Does it align to our strategic needs? What would the competition be like? What are the geographical areas it serves like? So I think we haven't got to a consensus on that new open style framework. I think it's interesting that it allows new competition, or competition has to be opened up at least twice potentially during the term of that framework. I think that keeps people on their toes. I think it ensures that contractors are engaging with that framework and the users of the framework, because they're likely to be omitted during the competition stage. So it's really interesting. I think we still need to see what those frameworks will look like when they come out to tender, but we'll certainly be keeping an eye on it, and be interesting to see how that will work in operation, how contractors' performance is measured, what good looks like through that term. So I guess we haven't as a business made a sort of a firm decision, because we haven't had the visibility of what those frameworks will look like just yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to pick on one of your points that you've just mentioned there, Josh, I suppose kind of what good looks like. I'm also very mindful that there's a lot of discussion about KPIs being implemented and much more closer sort of monitoring of contractors' performance and things. How do Wilmot Dixon feel about that? How do you, I'm presuming that you're under lots of different KPIs, under lots of different frameworks, just like you are under Procure Partnerships Framework. So just wondering kind of whether you welcome that, or any, again, thoughts and opinions on the increased level of KPIs.
So first and foremost, I think we're more than happy to work to set KPIs. We've been doing it for a number of years, ever since I've been at Wilmot, so eight years or so, and involved in the framework management side of things. We've always had stringent KPIs to report on that are monitored. They carry weight as well, which is really important. If we don't perform, corrective measures need to be put in place, and if poor performance continues, you do run a severe threat of potentially being suspended or omitted from future opportunities. So we've set our business up to respond positively to a wide variety of KPIs. We've got a performance portal known as My Project, which customers can access. They get visibility of the performance on their project throughout their project lifecycle, pre-construction, construction, aftercare. I guess the new focus on KPIs in the Act, I don't think it changes too much, but what it potentially does is allow customers to implement KPIs that are really important to themselves and their organisations. So it'd be interesting to see what those KPIs look like. But we do understand that those KPIs need to be reported on throughout the project or contractual cycle in the public domain. I believe that is a mandatory reporting requirement. So again, that keeps people on their toes. I think it's good that the public can see what organisations are being measured against and what organisations are measuring their contractors against on contracts. So again, the visibility of that data and information, I think, is quite important. I don't think it's anything that we or other contractors will shy away from. It's been baked into the frameworks like PPF since day one. So we're well set to respond to those and deliver or exceed on those KPIs, hopefully in most cases.
Brilliant. No, I totally agree. I think KPIs are really important. I know we're talking a lot about the procurement here, but equally as important is, the delivery of these projects as well, isn't it? So it's not just, kind of getting your public sector body and your contractor together. It's also what happens from there on in. Obviously a lot of the projects that we're working on together are very, large scale, high value. So, you need that long term sort of touching point, don't you? And to make sure that everyone involved is happy with how the project is progressing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So transparency seems to be another key topic as part of the new Procurement Act. In terms of notices, obviously there seems to be a large increase of the notices that clients need to kind of be publishing and putting out there. Have you had any ideas on that? Any sort of thoughts and feelings on how you think that the increased level of notices will bring to the industry?
Yeah, so certainly it's something that I think is potentially worrying some customers, particularly those with smaller procurement teams.
Yes.
This means there's more, the more the obligation on their part, the more resource potentially needed. So we understand obviously transparency is absolutely key. I think public procurement's been in the spotlight ever since the COVID issues that we've seen in the press. But instead of 2 mandatory notices at the moment, there will now be 4 mandatory notices. Procurement exercises undertaken under the new Act, but that could potentially increase up to 13 notices. So we're talking about some real changes, and I guess some concerns within our customer base are if we get those wrong, are we open to challenge?
Yes.
Does it constitute a failed procurement? And again, from a contractor's risk perspective, we don't want to go through the whole bid process, hopefully win that bid, and then the process be called into question. So getting our heads around that notice obligation, what transparency means, what information needs to be put into the public domain, it's really important. And then I guess as well, actually within that is conversation we've had with customers. Some of that information might potentially be commercially sensitive, so we need to be aware of what are red lines, what's potentially a data breach. So again, that's something we just need to understand in a bit more detail and get our heads around and be comfortable with what we're putting out. But totally understand the need for transparency. Public demand it, public deserve it. It's taxpayers' money. So I think, or know from the conversations we've had with a few customers, they're concerned at the obligation of transparency, not the issue of being transparent, but just the level of transparency that's needed when those notices need to be published, at what points, and what information should be included, because that's a big change.
Certainly. I think, it's no secret that will have an impact on the resource, like you've just mentioned then, that is already quite slim in some organisations. So I suppose it's, being transparent and publishing the notices, but then there's also the balance of making sure it's not too heavy-handed and they are all relevant and I suppose on the simpler side to sort of execute an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But again, it won't be a cliff edge in October. There'll be time to work through some of this and understand what it means from a project to project perspective.
Certainly, certainly. So, Josh, in terms of advice that you are currently giving to public sector bodies and potential clients, what does that advice sort of look like based on what you know so far? What kind of direction are you sort of pointing them in?
Thanks, Faye. Yeah, so I think from the conversations we're having with current and prospective customers, and a slight generalisation, but common theme is that I think they aren't aware of the full obligations that are now being levied on their organisations. So there's a huge emphasis on transparency and the notices that need to be issued into the public domain. That's a big change. I think one of the recent roundtables we hosted, that was clear that it was going to potentially cause some organisations challenges from a resource perspective. But I'm aware of a number of learning modules being made available to the public sector from the Cabinet Office. So there's a suite of learning from central government, a number of publicly available papers and guidance documents from legal firms. From our point of view as a contractor, I would suggest that customers and procurement teams and their capital projects teams embrace the changes, and particularly the guidance and suggestion that procuring authorities should be engaging the market early. We work in an industry with complex projects, risky projects. When procured right and engaged early, the overwhelming evidence suggests those projects are handed over in a much better place, and the outcomes on those projects are better, whereas projects that are slightly more transactional and the relationships are more transactional, are those that the data shows can be quite a challenge at times. So I think I'd suggest that early engagement is something to embrace and not be afraid of. And again, there's plenty of procurement routes out there like PPF that facilitate that in a compliant way. We as contractors in our supply chain bring huge amounts of innovation to projects. We can supplement existing teams for the better, and I think that early engagement piece is key to the success of projects moving forward through the new Act. Definitely.
Great stuff, brilliant. Okay, just to kind of, I suppose, summarise there then, Josh, are there any other sort of final thoughts that you have that you'd like to add in terms of what the new Procurement Act's likely to bring from a contractor's perspective?
So I think potentially we thought about some of the risks that it might bring, and I think because there are some wholesale changes in there, and it takes time for organisations to understand how to implement the new Act correctly. Particularly on construction projects that are complex. There could delay some procurement exercises if a customer wishes to go down the route of the new Act in terms of their procurement exercise. But then to mitigate that, there are procurement routes still available, still compliant, that provide a lot of the good advice and guidance that the Act is looking to achieve. So don't be put off. There's ways and means to deliver your projects now, and ways that will deliver value as well. I guess it's going to have to be a bit of a suck it and see in some respects. We as a business are trying to upskill our people and understand as much as possible about the Act before it becomes enshrined in October 2024 and live. Let's just have a conversation if there's a challenge and you're not sure about whether your project needs to go down a route in the new Act, or you want to talk about routes that are still compliant through 2015 and on till the end of that framework agreement being in place. So come October, I think we'll be in a much better place. But I can see a lot more training coming out over the next month or so. Let's all attend that. Let's raise questions amongst one another and with the experts if we're not sure, and collaboratively work through some of the challenges that we see together. So I think from our business perspective, we're looking to provide our customers with as much guidance as possible as a trusted advisor, and we'll continue to do that. So yeah, we'll see in October. I'm sure it won't be a cliff edge, and it will take time for us to all learn through it, I think. So let's welcome the changes, but let's implement the good advice and guidance within the Act for the better.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I really agree with that. That there's lots of knowledge in the industry, isn't there? And a lot of that knowledge can be shared, both from procurement to project delivery, and sort of everything in between. So it's really, really important that we kind of keep this conversation going. And yeah, let's see kind of what the future holds, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant, brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for your time, Josh. Really appreciate your insight there. As always, if anybody does want any more information on the new Procurement Act, please do visit the Procure Partnerships Framework website. We've got lots of information there, nice and easy to digest, kind of quick reads, to take you through kind of the headline points. So please do call by the website. Thanks so much, Josh.
Cheers, Faye. Thank you.
Thank you.